Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stripping the Dipping Live. You're joined by your usual co-host, aka Smooth Monday Morgan Freeman. It's AMG Dens presenting to you again another legendary live stream with some special guests that we always have throughout the month. This month makes no difference. In fact, I think we've topped the bar because we've got a very special and, on top of that, knowledgeable guest that's going to be able to give us a lot of insight into the world of F1, the stories in the paddock, and just generally everything as well to do with motorsport in and out as well. He's a correspondent of The Sun. He's an esteemed and qualified sports writer and a columnist with over 20 years reporting and editorial experience of marketing as well, online and with broadcasting as well. So please, everybody, whilst you're here, make sure that you write your comments in because it's an interactive stream. And please welcome our very special guest today, Ben Hunt. Ben, how's it going?
That's top billing. I hope I live up to that build-up.
I'm positive you will. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, all good. Back from Jeddah, slowly taking it all in, and decompressing, and ready for the next one.
Oh, absolutely. I could imagine, and just with like traveling on the road as well, with Formula One being the circus it's just incredible, just like how things change overnight, how one race weekend can completely change the dynamic of the sport and the stories we get as well. And what's your kind of, in a nutshell, your summary of the Jeddah Grand Prix? It's a new circuit which we've been to now for the third time. I still find it's like almost finding its feet within the F1 world of great tracks and circuits that we go to. But just from your experience being there in the paddock, watching the racing there as well, what's your honest assessment been of it so far as one of the new entries?
It's an interesting track. It's obviously very quick, but it hasn't lent itself to very good racing so far. I think we were fortunate in the sense that we didn't see a big accident. I always say that about that track, just because the way that it is. We were fortunate that we didn't have that. But yeah, we didn't really have a good race either, did we? So a bit sad. It's good to see what they have done with regards to building it and trying to make positive change. There's still a lot of work to be done over in Saudi, but small steps. Obviously, the country is now heavily involved in Formula One. You've got a lot of partnerships with Saudi firms. Aston Martin obviously heavily involved with the Ramco and Saudia, the airline. And of course, F1 themselves as well, having a lot of track sponsorship with the Ramco. So, the links are there. And I think that, from the weekend that we've just had, there's discussions about the Saudis wanting 2 races in Saudi Arabia in the coming years. Is that sustainable? Is it achievable? I don't know, but it's certainly something which they're looking at.
Oh, absolutely, Ben. I think, like you mentioned as well, there's definitely a business element to it in terms of the marquee and the market that they're trying to build there for motor racing, and on top of that as well, there's the connection with the the South kind of like Arabian kind of people as well.
Yeah.
And generally as well, just it's just interesting to see just like motor racing in a different hemisphere. We obviously have Bahrain, we obviously as well have Dubai, but then to have Jeddah as well in Saudi Arabia, I think is another kind of like one to add to that list of ever-growing circuits we go to. And like you mentioned as well, coming into Jeddah, it's always a bit of a sketchy one because the circuit designed by Herman Tilke has its like traits. It's probably one of the fastest street circuits there is, and so many blind turns as well. So in practice and qualifying, we're seeing a lot of chit chatter on the radio about making sure that people in the out lap were staying out of the way of other people on a quali lap, and etc. So definitely throws a lot of different dynamics there for sure.
It's strange being the second race. I think that when it was the first year, I think it was penultimate race, and that kind of, I think was it that late? But yeah, I mean it was late in the season. I'm not necessarily sure it's one that works so soon in the year, but again, there's potential for this race. I think in they're talking about it for next year being a season opener. So let's see what happens.
It'll be really intriguing if they do make that kind of move as well, Ben, for sure. And whilst we're doing the intro, we've got a few people in here, so say hello. Make sure you put your comments as well for any questions you want to ask Ben as well. The floor is completely open to all of our listeners. We've got F1 Black. Can't wait for this. I knew you were waiting. I knew you couldn't wait for this. So shout out to F1 Black as well. My co-host does an amazing job as well, and just a great addition to our team. We have my girlfriend Abigail. Abby, hello. She's in the corner as well, just looking at me too. So So it's always nice to have her inside here. And we also have 60 plays. So 60 also does some cool gaming content even. I almost made me choke. 60 lost my breath. But again, 60's just another legendary guy as well. He's an awesome content creator. So if you're into sim racing and stuff like that, make sure you check out his channel too, for sure. But either way, let's kick things off then, Ben, because one of the first kind of stories to jump in, I know we're saying hi to you, but unfortunately, we were saying bye to Angela because I think it was like Friday practice. The story kind of dropped that basically Lewis
strange, wasn't it?
and Angela Cullen had gone their separate ways, with Angela being Lewis's personal trainer. So what did you make of the story? And generally as well, is this a sign maybe of Lewis's commitment to the sport? Is it maybe that someone that he's held so close to him for so many years going their separate ways? This is a sign maybe that he might move on? It'd be interesting to get your kind of take and this the paddock's kind of response to it as well.
I've got nothing concrete or definitive. I obviously, part of my role is to do some digging in these particular stories, and news did break via Instagram. I think Lewis went first, saying that they've decided to split. Angela then went on Instagram saying, "I've got a new project," and from her message, it gave me the distinct impression that she's going on to something else. So it almost was like she had decided that she needed to do something. Okay, fine. The only difference was that when I asked Toto Wolff, his reaction to the news, he was sort of looking over his shoulder as if to, he's a communications head of communications, if to say, what do I say? Well, is this news out? Like, it almost caught him out, and that reaction was telling for me. His response was also interesting, where he said that it was Lewis's decision, and we always stick by Lewis, etc. And that obviously sent the momentum in the way of it was Lewis that called the shot. So a little bit of twisting and turning. The ultimate thing is we don't really know what's happened between the two. I think had it have been a not regular, but had it been expected, I don't think Angela would have done Bahrain. That was the weird thing, the fact that she was in Bahrain. And then obviously not to come to the next one. So different schools of thought. You speak to someone and they were saying, oh, it's management company saying that she was getting too high profile and, they wanted her out of the way. I don't believe that one. There was a suggestion from someone else that they had a bit of a row in Bahrain. Again, possibly. I don't know for sure. And the third one is that Lewis has obviously felt that he can't win the title this year and said to her, look, you go and do something else. We're not going to win the title this year. So, find someone else. But I honestly don't know what the truth is. The reality is that, she'd been with Lewis for 7 years. The other side of it is that Lewis does tend to do these things. He split from Mark Hines, who he'd known for years and years and years before. That was about 2 or 3 years ago. Mark was his kind of manager and traveled a lot with him. But ultimately now he's on his own. And I think, for me, that is quite sad to see someone being in F1 for such a long period of time without a friendly face around. Sure, there's people in the team. There's a guy called Steve-O who's helping out, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that he was a massive friend or a confidant, which is what Angela was. So real surprise, real sad to see her go. Had it been because of the profile, okay, I get that. Had it been because of the bust up, then I also understand it. So let's see where we go from here. Lewis has been a trainer, he's trained himself, I should say, for a number of years. So I don't think it's not as if he's not going to be, ready and fit to drive these cars. He may still not employ a trainer, but it was just the other things that Angela had done around, the circuit. So, prepare his food. She was a big influence in Lewis going vegan, and it's those sort of things I think where he'll miss. And probably, I know this sounds really tough, but of a night time when you go back to your hotel and you sort of think about what happened the day, during the day, I could imagine them having big conversations about what went on. And obviously she's not going to be there for him to have that, that sounding board. So it's a shame. I hope he finds someone else, because I don't think that it's healthy just to be on your own in that situation. Everyone else has got to manager or a team of people around them, just to keep them grounded, just to keep them, um, you know, refocused, and just take the pressure off, because this is a lonely existence, being on the road for 23 races if you are on your own. So I hope he sorts something out.
Oh, absolutely, and a very well encompassed kind of answer there as well, there, Ben. Because I was even going to ask you, and you answered it kind of yourself anyway. Just like, what psychological effect would that have on Lewis? With him not
Mm,
having such a close friend, a colleague to work beside him. When things are going up and you're winning championships, that's probably the fun part and the bit where everything comes a bit more naturally. But
yeah,
then when things aren't going your way, you're getting frustrated maybe because the team haven't gone built the car in the direction you want. They've not given you the setup maybe you preferred, and they've given it to your teammate. You've had this ongoing thing with the FIA regarding jewelry or other kind of
yeah.
stuff,
Oh gosh, yeah.
politically out of sport. I can't imagine that it'd be easy then to have, your second in command then leave, or for you to have to let them go as such
Mm.
as well, and to kind of see how that would affect him. But
I mean, he's
yeah.
been very good through all this, and I think the Lewis of 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago wouldn't have handled this, the way the Mercedes have done this with the car and various different things. I don't think he would have handled it in the same way. I think that he's very mature. He's not, there was a comment that he made to, after the Bahrain Grand Prix, where I've told the team and they didn't listen to me, and I think he admitted in Saudi that wasn't the right choice of phrase, but generally speaking, he's behaving, really, really well in terms of keeping lid on it and saying the right things and trying to drive the team forward. And of course, that comes with experience, and him shouting and screaming at the team isn't going to get anywhere. So yeah, he's keeping lid on it, which is good to see.
Absolutely. Well, I think that answers that one, Ben, and thank you for your insight into that too. I'm going to read a few comments whilst we're here. Got Reese, hello. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got the boss lady, Georgina, in the chat as well. Hi there, Georgina. Got RVD. For some reason, it's not showing us light. I hope that you guys can actually see it though, and I can see from some of the responses as well that you guys are getting this broadcast. So I'll have to review that hopefully, but hopefully it's not a technical hiccup that's going to hold us back. Georgina saying can't wait until we go back to daylight saving times. It won't be too long. I think, until the clocks go back. And a really good question from RVD here, Ben. You
Sure.
mentioned, Ben, that you can be lonely traveling to
Yeah.
23 Grand Prix on your own. Do you travel alone, or do you hang out with maybe other journalists?
I make my travel plans on my own. It's quite weird traveling with F1, because you go to, I make my way up from home to the airport, and then you get to the airport, and it's like a school journey. There's always a plane, depending on what flight you get, of course, but usually the flights that I get are full up with F1 personnel, teams, we're all wearing team gear, but there are a few journalists as well. But I do hang out with colleagues. I think that you need to. I think part of the job is, being, working together, but it's also being sociable.
Mhm.
Teamwork goes a long way in terms of helping each other out. You can't be in the same place. If there's two press conferences going on, you can't be in two places at once. So someone will go to one press conference, I'll go to another, and oftentimes you share transcribing, or you work as a team. And I think it goes beyond the work. It actually goes on to the evening side of things. So you go out for a pizza, chew the fat. I was playing golf today with three of my closest friends, which is Chris Medland, Lawrence Bretto, and Lawrence Edmondson at ESPN. So we do tend to hang out away from the track as well.
That's really insightful to know as well there, Ben. And I can imagine as well, it helps just, not to go through the entire experience on your own. And also, if there's like a piece of information that's been divulged, or,
Yeah.
something kind of comes out, you guys can kind of shed light
Well,
on it as well.
that's right. I mean, sometimes you need like a sounding board. Sometimes someone will say something and you'll think, "Oh, does that mean that or that?" And then well, what do you think? And then you can have a discussion, and when the dust settles, then you call it as you see it. But after it's gone through this filtering process, having spoken to your colleagues, and we do that throughout the race as well. So, for example, the Alonso penalty, I said at the same, at the time, that they haven't served that. Look, they've done that. And then someone else has gone, no, that's fine, because it didn't actually touch the car. And we had that discussion at the time.
Mhm.
And of course, and then it was funny that it would come into the news and everything else afterwards. So it's quite nice to have those chats.
Absolutely. And well, Ben, you must be a fortune teller because you've actually you kind of predicted where I was going with the next question. So we'll move on to the second one then, which was, and I'll phrase it this way because Blag kind of wanted to take all encompassing view,
Yeah,
although we'll talk about the penalty itself. How do you assess the relationship between the sports right now in terms of the commercial rights holder in
yeah,
Liberty Media and the governing
yeah,
body being the FIA? Because
yeah,
with these apparent continued mistakes, there's a kind of brewing theme, at least on Twitter, that Liberty Media might be getting a bit fed up with,
yeah,
the lack of transparency for the fans, the
yeah,
amount of blunders and mistakes. It can't be a great image for the sport. And on top of that, I mean, we'll talk about that like afterwards, very afterwards. But I know you also went on to talk sport as well, to go through the whole thing about the penalty, and even that
yeah.
must have been absurd. But I hand this one to you. Like, what's your take on that?
It is a mess, actually. It's a relationship which isn't healthy.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of egos at play, and I think that everything that the new FLA president promised us in terms of transparency and speed and accuracy of decision making clearly hasn't come into play, judging by the first two races. So, I think there's still a lot to be done to improve things. Communication is one thing as well, because we're not also getting the full message. Um, I think that the relationship between the two drastically needs to improve, because Sunday was an embarrassing one. You've got a dignitary handing a trophy to Fernando Alonso for third place. Now, he wasn't a run of the mill, you know, businessman. This guy was CEO of Aramco, which is obviously a state owned oil firm. Big sponsorship, big thing with F1, big thing with Aston. And of course, it was embarrassing to think that he was there handing this trophy, which 2 minutes later was being given to George Russell. So, you know, I just think that F1 looks at it and thinks that all the good that they're doing and everything that they're trying to, all the big positive steps that they're trying to make, and then it's coming back to an FIA decision, which is, making the sport look stupid. It's 2 o'clock in the morning when I was getting emails through saying, "Oh yeah, Fernando has got the third place," and that's unforgivable. 4 hours after the race, it's just silly to think that you're waiting that long to discover who was third. We talk about VAR in football, and people laugh and say, "Oh, it's taking forever and it's ruined the game." Okay, fine, but it doesn't take 4 hours to figure out whether the goal crossed, it was valid or ball crossed the line or whatever. Um, it's just silly. We've got to speed up this decision making process. They promised us a VAR setup, and it's there, but clearly it's not working. So they need to sort some things out. And I've suggested various different things, like a professional body of stewards. I think that would be one positive way to go. I think making the stewards accountable to the press to explain their reasoning would also be healthy, because they could explain the decision making rather than letting us interpret it in our ways. So I think the final thing I'd say about this is that rulebook does need to be rewritten, because they keep amending it and it's becoming too convoluted, and it's indecipherable for a lot of teams, and now the stewards. So it's a total mess and it needs rethinking.
Absolutely, man. I definitely agree with all the points you mentioned there as well, Ben. Even just from the fans' perspective as well, it can make the racing almost like quite frustrating to follow, because Formula One's put on a pedestal as the
Yeah,
greatest kind of like motorsport there is of all time. It's the pedigree of all motor racing, and then when you see blunders like this happen, it can really take away from the experience with fans, as well as
yeah,
that. Kind of to bring it into the same question as well, Ben. Like, how did the teams react, and what's their relationship with the FIA at the moment? Because although I mean there are always going to be slight nuances, and two
yeah.
incidents will always have varying little differences, but Alpine on one hand had the whole rule book threw at them in terms of what Ocon got, like the
Hmm.
race before. He probably felt like he was taking more penalties than Kylian Mbappe at a World Cup final with the amount of penalties he took. Whereas Aston Martin, it seems because Lawrence Stroll has this kind of demeanor, and this
Yeah.
kind of really serious businessman
You
kind of.
see, you've gone to that, and that's what I'm saying. That's why we need to have clarity to explain the decision making process, and you need to have someone come out and say, "This is what we've done," not in this wordy statement which we get sent. They're not they're indecipherable. It's just ridiculous, some of the stuff we get sent, and it's got to be someone telling us, as in journalists. It's also going to be someone telling the fans, direct to explain the decision making, because then it's clear for the teams. Because at the moment we're still in the dark as to what's acceptable and what's not.
Absolutely. Well, we'll look at a different question in this. One actually asked by one of our listeners as well. So shout out to Six again for his engagement and just asking some really good questions here. Slightly off topic, but do you think the W Series hasn't taken off due to marketing, to the masses, or coverage by the sports media? I hope it gets a bit of both, which is a very interesting take. And what would your response be on that?
I disagree with the fact it hasn't taken off. I think that it did take off because it was live on Channel 4, wasn't it? I think I'm right in saying. In terms of social media numbers, it went from a standing start to very big numbers very quickly. I think I think it also was a success. I think people were taking note of it. I was certainly writing about it, and ordinarily for a as I say, start a series from a standing start, you wouldn't normally get that much interest. I think the biggest problem was twofold. I think it was very expensive to expect to supply the cars and prize money and travel and everything else that went with it. You really needed to have sponsors with deep pockets and willing to invest in it. And I think that was a problem. But I also do think that when we talk about coverage by sports media, I don't think that F1 helped them out, in the sense of they weren't often shown on screens, and they were also given, like kind of really bad slots on the schedule. So they would often be going off very early, and then the race is maybe very late when people have already left the track. And I just don't think that they did. At the end, I think that there was a deteriorating of a relationship by virtue of the fact that F1 saw the benefit of the W Series, and it's no coincidence that they've now started their own academy. It's slightly different in the sense that the drivers will be obviously bringing the money themselves, but and racing not on the F1 bill. I think apart from Austin, I think that they come on, but it shows you that the idea is right, and I think the idea and the sentiment and everything else is correct, and that is the right way to get women into motorsport. So yeah, I sort of agree and disagree. I'm just sad that the W Series isn't, doesn't appear like it's going to come back. It's certainly not been. They've not confirmed a calendar, so that tells you probably a lot that you need to know.
Oh, absolutely there, Ben. And I agree with a lot of the points that you made. I also see Six's kind of concern for it as well, because it was one of those things where the people that didn't really check for it just didn't have any idea or inclination about it. But then there were people, I know, like a really good friend of the show, Asaf, that he bought the merchandise. He went to Silverstone and checked the race out, I think in 2021 as well.
Yeah.
And the people that were really interested almost like developed like a cult following for it in itself. So it's sad to see that.
Accessible. I mean, we would go and they made all the drivers available, and very welcome, and they really gave it a good go. And I think that's, for me, what's so disappointing is the fact that they had everything in place and they were really doing well. And they came so close to securing a big funding deal, and it just fell through at the last minute, and that's a shame.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go on to another question then about another kind of segment of young talents for the future. And one of our fans asked, Ben, what contact have you had with the rookies this season so far? And Sergeant Piastri, De Vries is, well, basically me, like 28 years old, and all these other young kids. But like, has any of them impressed you so far? What would you say about their personalities as well? Because as a rookie, I feel it's not only just about having the talent on circuit, but also being very well media trained, being able to come across, in the correct way to the fans and to the media as well. So yeah, what's your take on those three drivers so far?
On those three, I think personality wise, I think that there's still work to be done. I think it's probably just the way it is these days. You don't come in screaming and shouting, and also you becoming, dare I say, a little bit boring, but that's probably where they're at because they don't want to ruffle feathers. And I think for all three of them, it's just a case of just getting in, doing a solid job for the first half of the season and just seeing where they finish at the end of the year. And then obviously next year's the big one where they can push on to. So all doing okay. Sargent, I think I've been very impressed with, the start to, his race at the weekend, and the second half was a bit messy. Piastri, I think, has been unlucky. The first race obviously was 12 laps, I think, something like that, before the failure, and of course he took contact on the first lap. So we've not really seen just how good he is. He's sort of been hamstrung, and De Vries we know is good and can deliver. I just think that he's in a bit of a tricky situation. That car's not massively good, so he's going to find it quite hard to shine. But all of them are doing okay, and I think that they'll be around next year as well.
Oh, well, I mean, that's reassuring for all of our listeners to hear as well, because, already we've already seen people kind of going into each camp and saying, they like Logan Sargent more because the whole
Yeah.
American persona. Obviously, De Vries as well. He's so esteemed in other racing series such as Formula E. He won that Formula 2 championship as well and didn't have a seat for so long. So again, he's been there. And even with Piastri, I mean,
Yeah.
that's probably an interesting one to ask you about as well, Ben, in terms of are his dynamics going to be in that team where Lando can be quite a typically British character, quite sarcastic, quite very witty with things he'd say and how he'll say things to the media. I think a year ago he was quoted as saying he didn't care about Daniel Ricciardo. Why should he feel sorry for Daniel? So
Yeah.
it's interesting considering where McLaren are, that I wouldn't, based off what we've seen, they could be a lot better. But whether they're the worst team on the grid right now, I think it's a bit too early to say. But even with the dynamics of them, if Piastri was to get the upper hand going into the summer break, does Lando have anything to be concerned about? Also on the topic of Lando, with that long-term contract he has, if things don't work out at McLaren, is there anywhere he could potentially go on the grid?
Yeah, I asked him this every week, and he's like, "No, look, I'm here. I knew it was. I mean, the Lando line is, I'm here. I've signed a contract. I knew it was going to be like this. Everything's for 2024 with review to 2025. So, 2024 is where they want to be winning races. 2025 when they'll be competitive enough to win a championship. It's all very well saying that, but I think that the longer that this year goes on and the harder it becomes, I think you could probably see a different Lando. Incredibly driven, determined driver, brilliant racer. And I think that you'll find probably the other teams start sniffing around and testing the theory on that contract, just to see how tight it is. Because if he's got any inkling that 2024 is going to be a bit of a bad year as well, then I have no doubt that his team will be looking to get him in position, because he's certainly got the experience now, and he's certainly got the ability to win races regularly, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to fight for championships. So could be testing that contract. And as we know, McLaren and contracts are often a big source of entertainment. I think they've had a bit of a slow start, but I do feel that there's pressure building within that team. I like Zach Brown a lot, but I do feel that he's going to come under a little bit increasing pressure if they can't turn it around.
Absolutely. And I think, to be fair as well, Ben, it's probably due, because not too dissimilar to Ferrari, we could say, McLaren's a great staple. It's a name that's been in Formula One for, since basically Noah was a scout. You know what I mean? They're just one of those teams which have been around for so long.
Yeah.
And you think about the Senna days, Niki Lauda days, you think of the Hakkinen days, and even, Lewis being the most kind of recent world champion for them. They're a prestige brand which should be up there more. And then when you see brands like Aston Martin making that jump forward, the then question is,
I think you're right. That's really what they've got to look at, Aston, and make that jump, because you mentioned all that history and heritage, but another team that's got that is Williams. And the moment that you slip outside the top three or four, is quite easy just to slip back further and further and further. And if you do have a brain drain and talent goes elsewhere, it's very difficult to get that back, and also that motivation and that mentality back. And I think that's, at the moment, for me, what's worrying about McLaren, is that I don't see the enthusiasm, the passion's there with the fans. It's in, they are hugely passionate, but I just don't necessarily see that spark at the moment between the drivers or anyone in the back room, other than Zach. Zach's obviously a very colourful character, but they need some more drive and some more oomph, let's say, which will hopefully power through all the team and give them a bit of a lift.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't, for the McLaren fans as well, Ben, I would say it's not completely doom and gloom for them, because they've got a new wind tunnel which they've been developing as well. There has been kind of a reshuffle there in terms of the infrastructure and the personnel as well. And like you mentioned too, it's a team. Although you can't just live off your name, as you mentioned, obviously
Yeah,
with Williams, like they got the potential, and it's a real shame, that somebody like Lando that has so much potential, his growth might be stunted, and he might look at his peers in Charles, in George, in Max having their kind of top seats, and him
yeah.
kind of being the ugly duckling per se that's just on the fringes and not quite got the machinery to push. But then on the flip side, Ben, I mean, if Lando does leave, I guess McLaren could always get a young Mario Andretti back behind the wheel as they did in Kota. So that might be an idea for them. But anyways, on the topic of America and
Mm,
such is the great country.
yeah.
What has been your favorite Grand Prix and track to work from so far? That was a fan question we had. And are you looking forward to the Las Vegas Grand Prix for this year?
Okay. Favorite track to work from. That's interesting. I might have to come back to that. I'm terrible when people say, "Can you tell me your favorite something?" But to work from, I mean, obviously from a journalistic point of view, we're quite fussy, and it tends to be whatever's the best food, best Wi-Fi, best press room with a view. That's really how we judge it. Silverstone's pretty good actually for those things, food wise, believe it or not. View, we do get a good view because from the cafe you can see the start and finish line, and the Wi-Fi is pretty good. So to work from, and there is potential to stay at home as well. So to work from, let's say that one. Am I looking forward to Vegas? I think that's probably the bigger question. Yes and no. I think that as long as it's still interesting in the championship, I think that will be a great race. I think if it weren't to be the case, then I think it's going to be tricky to get excited about in the same way that F1 are getting excited about it. It will be a spectacle. It will be great. It will be at 10 o'clock at night. I think it will, and it will be potentially freezing cold. So it could be really interesting all round, couldn't it? But let's see. I think I love going to new venues and I love trying new tracks, and I think that this one will be a great one to experience.
Absolutely. And I think if we were to take any kind of idea or a blueprint from even just the Miami Grand Prix, that even
Yeah,
seemed like a spectacle in terms of the kind of pre-race weekend kind of shenanigans that were going on with the NFL team, the Miami
yeah,
Dolphins, the DJs that were there as well. It seemed like a really bombastic vibe, if I do say so myself,
yeah. I
in
mean,
terms of what was
I
there.
think it felt like a trade show. That's my an F1 trade show, or I mean, you say Super Bowl. I just think that the Miami track wasn't great, was it? It was just
Mm.
funny enough. We were talking about him a minute ago, Lando, but there was a mistake from Lando, which was it the safety car, and then that made it exciting between Lewis and Max for a couple of laps. But generally, it was a pretty dreary race, and I hope that it's going to be a better race this time around. But yeah, the razzmatazz and F1 and the way it works is quite interesting to watch. I don't think that. I think that was probably the busiest grid ever. Yeah, it's a few weeks' time, and I'm looking forward to going there.
Absolutely. And Ben, whilst we're on the topic of that, before we even get into the London part of it as
Mm,
well, how important is it for Liberty Media to strike the balance between having these like we call them crown jewel kind of
yeah,
events like a
yeah,
Monaco or
yeah,
like such kind of like circuits on the calendar compared with just the working man's Grand Prix like a Hungary or
yeah.
just a Spa, just like something where the family man just with every single penny of pistachio nut in the savings might be able to go there. Like, how much does that play, in terms of Liberty Media and the FIA's approach to where they go racing? Because I think one criticism of it is that, it's great, having a race in Las Vegas. It sounds awesome,
Mm,
whoopie doo. But, for the normal average
not
working
affordable,
class
is it?
person, it's not
Yeah,
affordable.
yeah.
How does that play a mind for them?
Um, I think it's a tricky one because at the end of the day, it's a business. Liberty Media bought F1 to make money and to make it profitable. And I think that so much of F1's revenue now is driven by sponsorship deals circuit deals, I should say. You've got, Saudi, there's figures, some people say it's up to 60 million to host the race. That's big money. And I think that I mentioned the fact that Saudi would like two. And you're like, all right, okay. Ultimately, there's no shortage of takers, and that's where Liberty and F1 are fortunate in the sense that if they look at the contract and say, French Grand Prix, well, you're not paying very much, and all of a sudden we've got South Africa waiting, and they're willing to pay, twice much, whatever. Ultimately, they're going to take that option, aren't they? It'd be great to go back to South Africa and obviously go to that continent, but it could be anywhere. And I just think that F1 do need to be mindful of these older races, and I think they are. They're always looking to do deals to make sure that Silverstone stays, that Monza stays, that Spa stays. But I do foresee a time where it may be a case that some of these venues are maybe a little bit dilapidated and not offering much in terms of a fan experience, because when you compare what you get, even at Saudi, the concerts that they put on and the fan facilities and turning it more of an event is great. Up until 4 or 5 years ago at Spa, you were lucky if you got a cover on a grandstand, but that was about your lot. You didn't really get proper toilets, you didn't get catering, you didn't get much in the way of entertainment other than the F1 race, maybe F2 and Porsche Super Cup. Whereas the American races and what we're seeing is more fan engagement. And you mentioned the fact it is expensive. Yes, it is expensive, but you're now getting more for your money in terms of entertainment. If you exclude a dreary race, in theory, you are getting more in the way of entertainment. So it's tricky, a balancing act. I hope that we don't lose those, but at the moment we're at 23 races. 24 is the maximum we can have as per the current regulations. I can see 24 easily in the future, and I can see we're going 25, 26. And I also think that it won't be long before we see midweek races as well, in the same way we had Champions League, be a success for in terms of football. But you could quite easily put a night race at some of these venues, certainly in the Middle East, and have 2 races on a Wednesday. Well, Sunday and Wednesday.
That would be intriguing and something that's never really crossed my mind before, Ben. So again, I think
it kind of makes sense, because then you can do 2 in one venue. So from a logistical, operational, and financial point of view, it makes a lot of sense, because the circuit will be paying twice or 1.5, depending on what deal they got. And I think the teams could knock 2 races out, and it wouldn't be so much of a burden as it would be to go somewhere else the following week.
And then have to come back or vice versa. So absolutely.
Yeah, which is, the scary thing. We're talking about calendar at the moment, but I've got real concerns about the end of this year. So at the moment, we're all quite cool and relaxed, and it's all very well going to Bahrain, coming back, have a week off, Saudi week off, blah blah blah. But no one's really thinking too much about the end, other than Vegas, which you mentioned. But before Vegas, we've got a triple header across 2 continents, which we've never done before. So Austin, Mexico, Brazil, that's a big slog. Now, I've done those races, and it is hard. It's hard going. When you come back from there, you're shattered. That's what I'm talking about when you're coming back from Mexico. To add Brazil onto that as well, we know that it can be tricky, shall we say, logistically, getting in and out of the track. But then when you factor in the fact that you've got Vegas just a few days later, and Vegas is back to back with Abu Dhabi, that is a grueling schedule. 6 weeks, 5 races, it's bonkers. And just think about where they are in the world, wherever people are listening from. But, the fact that you've got Austin, Mexico, Brazil, predominantly people coming back to Europe, then back to Vegas, then Vegas to Abu Dhabi, it's just crazy.
It is nuts. That is bizarre. And thinking about time differences as well, altitude, just even the fatigue, I can imagine being immense there, Ben. So, we definitely feel it for you guys in relation to that.
What about parts? This is another thing. How many spare parts you're going to have if you smash up something, at the start of that triple header, could be a mess, especially with budget cap. What about if you've got life parts that you can't turn around quick enough? There's loads of complications with it, and I just don't think that we've necessarily thought this one through.
I think that's a shared and common view as well, Ben. And absolutely, I think I've seen quite a few people say that in terms of scheduling, or just even with China being kind of dropped, there's nothing in between there, or it doesn't seem like the FIA or the Liberty Media had like a contingency plan in the event that didn't work out, that we could potentially go somewhere else to fill up that space and spread things out a bit more equilaterally. So absolutely. And kind of the final bit on this question as well, Ben, is as a London boy myself,
Yeah,
You know, I need the tea, Ben. I need the tea. You know,
yeah,
is there anything in the pipe work at all for a London GP? Because before you step in, you know, I think a couple of weeks ago it was announced that Tottenham Hotspurs have done a deal
yeah.
with F1. You know, so I'll have another local go-karting circuit to beat my girlfriend at while she beats me at golf. So something for me to get a bit equal on. But F1 in London, it would make sense, and to why it hasn't happened, I wouldn't know. But do you have any tea on this one at all, or any
Listen,
info on this?
I'm sorry, but it ain't gonna happen.
No.
um, it's not going to happen.
Mm,
The story that you're referring to was a developer had suggested that they wanted to build a multi-sports purpose venue,
mm,
and they did a glossy magazine with it, and they included F1 as part of the proposal, and they didn't submit that to F1. They didn't even ask F1 to use the logo, so that's a potential lawsuit, I would imagine. But I just think it's a bit of a mess
mm,
from the publisher's point of view. Sorry, the developer's point of view, because they've obviously used it to try and get some interest in the development. But F1 aren't talking to those people about putting a London race on. We had it a few years ago. There was an advertising campaign with Santander, I think it was, when they were sponsors of McLaren, and there was a dummy track going past Buckingham Palace and all this stuff, and it was just a PR stunt, but people get excited about it, and rightly so, because I think it could work. But you do have Formula E, and I'm afraid you just have to go and watch that instead.
I guess I'll take that then. I guess I'll take that. You know, before we get into the next question as well, I'll go through some of the comments. So, when you're talking about like the benefits of the Silverstone race and the nice food, Blag cheekily said, "I hear Red Bull Catering is pretty tasty."
It
You know, in
is.
relation to their cost cap. So,
It is.
little slight jab there. Abby saying the Red Bull Catering sounds like it'd be a party. I want to join them. Of course, she would.
I tell you,
Uh,
the best catering is at Pirelli. That's the best food.
have they got the best food?
Yeah, best
Oh,
chef. Yeah, at the moment. I was in there in Bahrain and the food was fantastic.
I could imagine. So it's not only cookers, so not only tires they're cooking up in there, but great food as well. So
Yeah.
I'll take that from Pirelli anytime at all. Abby is well saying yes, F1 at the best stadium. Not quite, not quite, but I hear Levy will probably make a nice, chunk of change from that deal inevitably.
I tell
So
you
there
what,
is always that.
it's a good good thing all round, I think. That's one thing with Liberty Big, good at is sticking their toe in the water and trying different things. And I think it's good to have this partnership with Spurs, this kart track which they want to build, because um, predominantly people in F1. I used to cover golf, and golfers, in order to get into high level golf in the same as F1, you need to have a lot of money. And the people that I deal with in F1 are the same as the golfers, and they all come from privileged backgrounds. Their parents are loaded. Like it or not, it will cost you about 9 million quid to get to F1 once you've been through all the junior categories. So you either need parents with or relatives with deep pockets, or to have support from a manufacturer. But you do need that money to get going in the first place. So we are missing, people, that come from normal backgrounds, the ones that go to the go-kart track and like it and are good. And I think that this can work in some sort of um, talent pool, because if you've got some young kids going along there and trying it, because there's an affiliation with F1, there might be some sort of F1 academy program, which is what I think they're trying to do. So you may be you may find the next Lewis Hamilton in that way, because until you open it up to masses and make it affordable, and F1 starts looking at the lower categories, that's how you attract those stars, because we're losing so much talent. There's great drivers out there, but they just don't have the finance to get through karting. And it's a shame. We need someone, a scout, to be working for F1 in association with Spurs. And there could be a guy that goes, quite a few times. And actually, this kid's got something. Is there anything that we can do to help him to get on the ladder? And I think that would be great to see.
Absolutely, and I definitely echo your sentiments there as well, Ben. And I think you articulated it perfectly because I feel at least for the normal people there isn't really a voice, so there's not too many opportunities out there, and even to have this affiliation, this link between F1 and the football
Mm,
club as well. We even seen just in other kind of facets. You've got Beyonce performing there, Wizkid. It's kind of given the area, like a new lease of life as such,
yeah,
and given kind of like a kind of like a buzz to it, and kind of like a sense of joy, a sense of opportunity, maybe that there are going to be opportunities like you mentioned for
yeah,
the next kid to come up and to go through maybe some sort of competition, trial, whatever the case may be, and
yeah.
get an opportunity. So definitely looking forward to seeing how that one goes. And even if it's not a full GP, at least I would still take that as an opportunity as well for the
There might be a
local area.
trophy on offer as well, which Spurs need, don't they? So, just got the trophy cabinet up.
Oh, as my girlfriend's a Spurs fan, I'm not going to say anything to that, Ben, but that was a smooth one. That was a smooth one. I like that jab. I like
I
that
do
jab.
apologise.
Right. So we've talked about circuses on the
Mm,
topic of which, F1. Ben, you followed the circus now for over a decade.
yeah.
What would you project Formula One to be in the next 10 years? And
Mm.
how do you see the sport going, just in terms of the sporting element, the actual just product itself? And, what would be new in 2033 that we don't have in 2023 at the moment?
I think F1's always been a bit tricky in the sense that it's a sport, it's entertainment, and it's business, and it's kind of in a constant tangle between those things, which is why we have so much politics in Formula One compared to other sports. The way I think it plays out is that F1 needs to capitalize on the eyeballs that it's got at the moment with regards to Netflix. The Netflix thing will fizzle out, and then it starts has to telling its own story. I think there'll be a shift to focus on driver personalities. I think that that's key. At the moment, I mentioned before, but they're all a bit too wooden, and I think that they've got to come out of their shells and just do a lot more. It's difficult to know rule wise how it will play out in 2033. If you're asking me what my gut instinct is, it is that it drops the hybrid element of the engine, and we go into fully sustainable fuels, and it becomes more entertaining. I think that F1 doesn't need to focus on hybrid technology. I think that that's what Formula E is doing, or electric technology is Formula E, but we don't necessarily need that hybrid element. And I would welcome that. More straightforward to understand, straightforward to produce, cheaper to produce. And I think that with that, you could see more manufacturers coming in. And of course, I just seen that comment. Yeah. You won it twice, I think. Is that right? Or was it three times?
There's still dust in the cobwebs,
Saudi
Ben.
Cup.
There's still dust in the cobwebs.
So no, to finish off, I just see that they need to make a sensible choice with regards which direction it's going, and I think that it needs to drop the other aspects, focus on the sporting, but make it more simple. Simple for everyone to understand. And I think that it also incorporates shorter races. I think that the current situation of an hour and a half race is too long. I think we should be looking at an hour. I think the cars should be lighter, more simple, and hopefully we have the personalities as well.
I think that's a great blend of different explanations and answers and propositions as well there, Ben. And I agree, you talked about the sustainable aspects of it as well and turning to biofuels. We already saw with, I think, with Seb Vettel last
Yeah,
year at Silverstone with the
yeah,
demonstration he did with Nigel Mansell's Red 5, Williams as well, that it can be done. We're also seeing kind of in a lot of experiments as well with at Goodwood and so forth as
yeah,
well. Lots of manufacturers kind of like, use the hybrid and electric aspects of technology as a selling point for them and the
yeah,
consumer kind of part as well. So I agree with you. It would be nice just to see motor racing just return back to motor racing, to wake up to the days of having the nice burly V10s, like as I remember as a kid as well, listening to Michael and
mm,
Mika as well. And yeah, I think for sure, in making the sport more simpler to follow without losing its DNA, I think will be the ultimate balance in engaging the hardcore fans and
hmm
also like keeping the new ones in from Drive to Survive or
Yeah.
the series. And you mentioned as well, even just the driver personalities, which is really key. And you see Red Bull doing a lot with a lot of the media work they do and the funny kind of like 3-minute trailers they drop. George Russell and Lewis as well do their kind of bits in ways that they want to as well. Actually, one question on the top of this as well, Ben, in terms of like teams allowing drivers to do certain things or convey their personalities.
Yeah.
Valtteri Bottas was quoted the other day saying that he has this mullet that is quite 80s, and the fact that he's happy to have it now, but at Mercedes it wouldn't have been maybe a thing that would have been in line with their company policy, which I feel was a bit bizarre considering Lewis, on the other hand, has a
Yeah.
different hairstyle every week. But not necessarily even specifically for Bottas, but just generally, is it true that teams maybe have more traditional views and some teams might be more open in terms of allowing drivers to do what they want and express themselves?
Yeah, I think that there was obviously a team uniform, and they all pushed the boundaries. So, um, Lewis is allowed to wear what he likes when he comes into the paddock, and you'll always see those outfits on a Thursday, which is so flamboyant and wonderful. And then he'll change into team gear, although it won't always be team gear. There'll be, whether it's the trainers or whether it's the trousers, there's the shirt's always team gear, but not all of it is, and that's him expressing his personality, testing the envelope, and getting away with it. And I
Mhm.
think that he's able to do that because it's Lewis, and they give him that breathing space and everything else, and that's quite cool. I think if Bottas were to do it, they might say, "You've got to wear your team kit. Can't get away with that. You haven't won 7 titles, so you can't get away with that."
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think that's probably what he means.
And I think it's fair as well. If you win championships or if you go on such a dominant streak, I guess it becomes harder for the team to really tell you. And even, well, we're gonna get onto the whole Red Bull situation, but even
Yeah.
Max these days apparently he's been a bit more outspoken, not going to engineering meetings and stuff like that as well, out of frustration or just because he's at that
Mm.
stage. But it's interesting just to see over time how personalities developed, how like even with Seb was kind of this young kind of like kid when he first joined as well, blonde hair, blue eyes, everyone was so excited. Then he made that jump from Red Bull to Ferrari, and it was like he was emulating Michael, and that was the
Mm.
storyline. And then almost I think a lot of the people that had like not liked him or had kind of taken a disliked him because of his dominance at Red Bull or because of like the antics at Ferrari started to
Yeah,
see this more kind of like like eco side of him when he was doing all
yeah,
this stuff for good causes at
yeah. I
Aston
mean, he,
Martin.
he he always had a personality at Red Bull, but you never really quite got to see it. So I
Mm,
knew he was fun, and you could have a laugh with him. But then he was also pretty dreary in front of the camera, and in press conference he was hard going. So it was only after he had kids and he looked at the bigger picture, and let's admit, not in a competitive car, not fighting for wins, not fighting for world championships, that he started to look at other things, and that's when he was expressing himself more, and he become
mhm.
more of a personality, which was wonderful, really good to see. I just wish we got to see more of that when he was in his pomp, because I think that people would have really appreciated it.
Absolutely, it's so true, and I think it's interesting how sometimes it's life events, like you mentioned as well, which will change a driver, or just even with the times, teams are kind of in a competition now to get that kind of social media presence and to
Mm,
build a fan base. And I think Red Bull are really lucky to have an individual like Daniel Ricciardo, for example, where
yeah,
it's almost natural, and you could get that guy to open up a bar, and he could have like a comedian night the entire day.
yeah,
Him and probably going to Steiner, together.
yeah,
Ben, that's probably an idea. Probably need to get a show with the two of them on there. That would make good entertainment. But anyway, we'll go on to the next question then, which there's more to this do with the dynamics of the sport at the
mm,
moment and the balance of performance. So after Saudi Arabia, Lewis was one of the few outliers that started the race on the hard tires, which I thought was an odd move because he did the
me
same
too.
thing last year.
Mm,
And I always said if a safety car was to come out early,
yeah,
it would put him in a kind of vulnerable position because he'd have to nurse medium or soft tires to the end, which is
mm,
not great, or you would just have to like pit again for another set of tires, which Mercedes just don't have the pace in hand to pull something like that off. So
yeah.
kind of bizarre. But either way, he gave an interview with the media and he was saying that, the pace advantage that Red Bull had was like nothing you'd ever seen before, which is a big statement to make considering he's
Yeah.
been on the grid now for such a long period of time. And the question really in that is there like an issue with Red Bull being so dominant? Is this kind of a thing where we're going to see a repeat of the Mercedes years, the Ferrari years, where it does become predictable and viewership starts to decline? And if so, is it really the FIA's kind of headache or Liberty Media's kind of like concern to do something about it? Because we were told at the dawning of this new formula that it was a new age. These new cars, they were going to follow each other a lot more easier. We're going to introduce this cost cap as well, which again has its own thing. There's a lot of thought in this one. It'd be interesting to get your take on that as well.
Okay, there's loads in this, isn't there? So let's just do with this bit first. Is it a concern for the FIA? No, because they just manage, they're the referees. It's not a concern for them. It is a big concern for F1. They need it to be entertaining. I think that new viewers have grown up with Netflix and the heavily edited stuff, and anyone tuning in now to watch is seeing a procession and talking about tyre management. And effectively what Red Bull are doing is getting in front and then turning everything down to preserve the life of the engine and the gearbox and everything else. So it's absolutely managed comfortably. The only thing that could derail them is the issue between Max and Checo. I think we saw in a cool down room that Checo was slightly miffed that Max had taken fastest lap. He did it on a set of 32 lap old tyres. And he was 2 seconds quicker than everyone else. So if anyone wants to talk about pace advantage, that is a statistic that you probably should be looking at. The fact that on old tyres and he was 2 seconds quicker than everyone else. I mean, it's phenomenal. The rest of the time, he says it sometimes, I'm just managing, and that's all he's doing. He's just coasting around, not pushing too hard. They were told to, getting back to my point, they were told to stay at the same gap, so they weren't going to overtake each other. But of course, Max started eating into that lead, and then obviously pumped in that fastest lap. And I think Checo was a little bit miffed to see how close he was come the checkered flag, because another couple of laps and Max would have had him probably. Let's see how that dynamic plays out, because there was a big row after what happened in Monaco last year, and some bad blood, which sort of resurfaced at the end of last year with everything won. Now they've got something to fight for. I think that there could be some fireworks between those two. Checo knows that he's in this fight. This is his best opportunity ever to win a world title. It's the fastest car ever, probably, that's ever been made in F1. I think Lewis is right, and no one can catch him. So he knows that he needs to knuckle down, and I wouldn't put it past him doing a Nico Rosberg and just being totally focused on achieving that goal.
Absolutely, Ben. And again, man, you've got a crystal ball or something, because all of these questions, you're a carve ahead.
Yeah, look at this.
You're gonna have to give me the lottery numbers later, man. But yeah, I mean, you addressed it perfectly, and it's a great segue onto this topic, which I think is another kind of headline that came out, was Multi 32. So I know you like this because it's kind of a nod to good old Multi 21.
Yeah,
but again, we've seen something like this at Red Bull, where you've got two drivers, one with like raw natural ability, and one that he's just very experienced, and he's been through all the mind games. Sergio Perez, for God's sake, he's been through administration of a team. So he's been through the hardship. Exactly. So he's been through the hardships, the ups and downs. But the question, I guess, is, Ben, because you have this is probably one to throw to you, is how do Red Bull manage this? And they've got their golden egg in Max, which they don't want to upset. He's got a really intimidating dad in Just as well, that seems like, he says what he says and will do what he will do, But then on the flip side, you've got Perez, which is working on the basis of meritocracy. Obviously, I guess the point may have been that if Max hadn't had the drive shaft issue on Saturday, maybe he would have won. He would have, which is the thing. But if Perez can somehow keep up with Max, how would the Red Bull really manage this in terms of this ultimately getting the constructors making sure that they don't fall behind, which again it's hard to see as it is with the performance in that car.
Mm.
But also, yeah, it's quite intriguing. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I don't think that they're. I think they're hoping not to manage it in the sense
Mhm.
that it just sorts itself out. In the sense that Max is just beating Checo every week. I think that's probably what they want, and they want Checo to deliver second place in order to clinch the championship, like he did last year. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario for them. Um, but I mentioned before, I just think that Checo should know that this is his best chance to win a title, and maybe that will make things a little bit more tricky to manage. In the sense that Max may not get it all his own way from his teammate. We'll never forget the way that Checo did what he did in Abu Dhabi 21 to help Max win that title. And I think there's a sense of payback in the sense that he wants that title now himself. Coming towards the end of his career, would love to go out as a world champion.
Yeah, it would make sense, and like you mentioned as well, there, Ben. I think you
Excuse me.
nailed it spot on when you were saying like it's quite similar to Nico in that sense of,
Yeah.
like you've got that superstar teammate, but there are little things you can do here and there as a psychological mind game, as just like even positioning your car or the body language of certain things you do,
Mm,
even the tic tac of, oh, I'll get the fastest lap. Okay, he's got the fast lap. I'll get the fast lap again. It
mm,
must kind of grate Max, and if it's the
mm.
sort of thing where the team aren't looking to intervene just yet, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out and to,
Yeah,
to
I,
see.
I I think I think Checo's got to dig deep and look at how to press Max's buttons, and I think that's probably how it's going to work. I think watching the way Nico did it, he was very much focused on himself and not worried about Lewis. He made extraordinary sacrifices, like not seeing his family, sleeping in separate rooms, and just really cutting himself off just to be 100% focused in order to win that championship. Which is why he retired so soon after winning it. He knew what
Mhm.
it took to win a title, to beat Lewis. He now finally knew what it meant, or what it was required, and then what it meant for him, and he decided, no, this isn't for me. I think Checo's probably got to do the same. Is he going to do the same? Similar situation to Nico in the sense that he's got, a family, in Mexico. Will he cut himself off for them? I don't think so. I think he's probably more, I don't want to say more of a family man because Nico's a family man as well, but
Yeah,
maybe he may find that harder to do. But if he wins the next couple of races, who knows? He may see this as a real opportunity.
absolutely. And whilst pace is one thing, reliability it seems is just up in
Yep.
air at the moment.
Oh, I
So
know what that's coming.
absolutely, absolutely.
I know where we're going with this question. This is question number 9, isn't it?
Of course, which
Yeah.
is Ferrari Frederick Vasseur. Come on, Ben. Like, if I ever need a job working for the Sun, maybe with the headlines, come on.
I think you need to work on that one, I'm afraid.
Oh, come
Yeah.
on, man. Come is this
Yeah. Not bad. Not bad.
Oh, solid 5 out of 10. Okay.
Yeah, okay, that'll do. Yeah, 5 out of 10.
But all right then. So we've talked about reliability and how that can be a headache. And wow,
Mm,
Ferrari, yikes! Just go into the start of a new season,
yeah,
you have an issue with the control electronics. Okay, you replace it. I think they get 2 in the pool for the control electronics, right? Before
correct.
incur. So they've had they're on number 2. Then you're kind of in the last third of a Grand Prix. Second place is up for grab for Perez. Max out of sight. So you're gonna try and push for that second place. The car breaks down again. It's like,
Mm,
okay, might have to turn down the engine for the upcoming Grand Prix. We're going to take obviously the grid penalty as well for incurring a third element before we're allowed to or out of the allocation. Only and as well for it to be a recurring issue again. Just how much pressure is Frederick going to be under, Ben, in terms of like nailing this thing down? And on top of that, do you think Ferrari have made a mistake in letting Binotto go? Because we know that whilst Binotto, in terms of holding people accountable and doing the
mm,
nasty side of the job, the cutting edge side, he
yeah,
might not have had that killer kind of streak. But in terms of his technical know-how, he came to Ferrari as an apprentice.
yeah.
He worked throughout, the Ferrari era with John Todd and Ross Brawn and Rory Byrne, all these like great designers as well. Have they missed the trick maybe by letting him go completely?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe I hadn't really thought too much about him going, I thought a lot about whether Fred was the right person.
Hmm.
Possibly wouldn't have been my pick, but he does know Charles Leclerc very well. He does know how to run a race team. Um, the thing I would say about the reliability issues, that's not really his fault. I think, he would be relying on the engineers and everyone telling him that this stuff was good. And, the fact it broke, I don't think you can blame him for that. But what you can blame is strategic calls. I don't think that they were particularly good at the weekend. I think that definitely needs ironing out. I think the biggest thing for me is that we still haven't seen Ferrari recruit anyone else. And I thought that once Fred went, he would be using his vast experience and contacts throughout motorsport to recruit new members into that Ferrari team to oversee the strategic elements, and operationally as well. So they're the problems for me that need ironing out. We all know them. Every person knows them. I'm just surprised that he hasn't done it yet. So is Ferrari Frederick Vasseur? I don't think so. I think that he was the best candidate available to them at the time.
Hmm.
I personally would have thought that Andreas Seidel would have been a better fit and a better man to go for in that particular circumstance. Whether the Audi deal had already been done by then, I'm not too sure. But
Hmm.
I'm quite excited to see what he's got in the pipeline with Audi coming in. And I quite like him as an operator. I think he did quite well at McLaren to galvanise and a lot of spirit and passion driving that forward, which I think they're missing now. Um, can Fred? I mean, Fred's got time on his hand. He's only just gone in there, but the pressure will build if they do have another stinker like they had last year, and they don't need that. He doesn't
Absolutely.
need that. So
For sure. Well,
there you are.
pun
You help
intended.
yourself.
But yeah, just like in relation to that as well, Ben, like how easy will it be for him to iron out some of these idiosyncrasies though? Because again, all right, reliability aside, which is something which maybe might take a bit more time to come in.
Yeah,
Even the simple things you mentioned in terms of strategy, like Charles Leclerc is pushing up, a yellow flag's been waved, leading to a safety car. Only then for his engineer Javier to come on the radio and say,
yeah,
push to the safety car line to catch Hamilton. Charles Leclerc's come back apoplectically saying, Javi, mate, you have to tell me before. You
yeah.
can't tell me after we've gone past the safe. How easy would it be for Fred to like get onto the bomb and stuff like that? Because rumor is as well that he's apparently moved the HR department
Excuse me.
office right next to his office as well.
Well,
So it doesn't sound like he's messing around.
I mean, if you're talking about, football, we've segued into football a few times, but
Mhm.
manager's only had 2 games. You can't judge him yet, and
Mm.
the team, if you want to use that term in terms of the car, is still the previous manager's car. Fred wouldn't have had much input in this car, so it's still a Bonotto car. I just think that strategically, the fact that nothing's changed, I think things do need to change, and they do need to get smart quickly. Um,
Mhm.
if he is doing that, then that's a good sign in the office if that's how it's working. Because obviously, as I mentioned, we all know the problems. He must be aware of the problems. If he's aware of them, then he's got to fix them because the pressure will build. The weird thing with Ferrari is the culture is very different. They talk about politics more so at that team than anywhere else, and also the pressure to deliver for the Italian public is probably unlike nothing that he's ever experienced before. So he really does need to get on top of that quickly.
Absolutely. And just kind of final question on this one as well, Ben, before we get into the actual overall question as well, is like how would you describe the way the Italian media are with,
Yeah.
especially in the motorsporting context, with kind of like the British public? Because not to
Mm,
go on a long synopsis, but even just me as a motorsport fan, I was following a GT3 driver in Raffaello Marcello. He's like of half Swiss, half Italian descent, and he's been absolutely tearing it up in GT3 racing sports
mm,
cars with, the AMG program and winning high, profile events. But all the time, the media always talk about Valentino Rossi
yeah.
making the switch, obviously, from MotoGP into, and I remember one dominant race weekend, Raffaello Marcello got fastest lap in practice, fastest lap in qualifying, fastest lap in both sprint races, only for the Italian media to say, Mercedes driver wins the race, whilst Valentino Rossi secures 8th place. And he was apoplectic, So
Yeah.
is it like what are the Italian media like, compared to like us Brits?
Um, I think that they are very similar to the way the Brits work. I think that there was a story that come out of the weekend where um, I think it was Carlos was asked about it, where apparently there was a story running in Italian media that he'd asked for showdown talks, and there's always showdown talks, aren't they? But he's asked for talks about various different things, and what was it? I can't remember which one it was, whether it was Charles or whether it was Carlos, one of the Ferrari drivers. I think it, no, one of the Ferrari drivers. Let's stick with that. And they said it was something like 90% of the things they talk about, 90% of the things the Italian press say aren't true. And you're like, okay, so there's still 10%. So wonder which bit he's talking about. But I do feel that there is a sense that the Italian press do get stuck in, and of course they are only interested in one team, and that's Ferrari. So they're totally focused on that, and I think that I mentioned before, pressure just builds from there.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it, especially as well with a brand like Ferrari, which to me, it's almost like a religion, man. When you go to Monza and you just see the Tifosi there with all the red kind of flares and
Mm,
just I love a bit of passion. But yeah, it's incredible just to see how that, transcends into the sport and how the energies feed off of each other. Blags made a joke here as well. Maybe
yeah.
Vasseur interim cover for someone else, maybe a Nuno Espirito Santo before Ferrari. Bring in Antonio Conte. Oh gosh, here we go. Set him off here, Ben. Sixty's laughing at that as well. Raffaello Marcello. Abby singing the Raffaello Marcello song. Love that.
Yeah,
And 16 again. Remember they used to ring the church bells every time Rossi won a race, which I could
absolutely.
imagine. I
Yeah,
could imagine, which again is this a testament to when you have a sportsman and they're almost like a national treasure to the
yeah.
country they represent, and just the doctor himself and everything he achieved in motorbike racing, what he's doing now with GT3s and his
Mm,
academy that he runs too. So yeah, Black saying Alexander Rossi is a big deal. I think that's a different type of Rossi on the IndyCar things. But Pato Ward is the guy really that is the top guy at McLaren. So we'll leave that there, Black. But Ben, it's been amazing to have you. And before we let you
cool.
go, just we have to ask, have you got
Mm,
any funny exclusive kind of memories or stories that you haven't like shared yet with anybody? And also just for the young kind of spring
yeah.
chickens out there looking to become the next Ben Hunt. You're talking about
Gosh, that's
Tottenham.
scary, isn't
uh,
it?
they exist. They
They
do
don't.
exist. But yeah, just like any funny moments, any kind of exclusives that you can give us at all, just traveling on the
um,
road with the sport and tips.
no, not necessarily funny moments, but I think that there's been lots of instances where I make a mistake, and I think that you shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes because you learn.
Mhm.
Um, I remember writing an article for the Sun when I was freelance, and I'd spelt Kevin Peterson, the cricketer's surname, wrong all throughout the piece, and I got absolutely um, laughed at by the guy on the phone, and told me to sort myself out, which I did. But you kind of learn your mistakes along the way.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. There's no real funnies. I don't think there probably are actually. Um, but you'd have to give me about 20 minutes and I'd write them down. But tips wise, people just have to be prepared to graft. I think, working long hours is part of it. You never have a day off. I'm on a day off today and I'm talking to you. I did a podcast earlier on. I think that you just have to be flexible. You have to have an understanding family. The reintegration from F1 life to family life is the hardest thing because, you go from talking to Lewis Hamilton, flying back and then straight back home and then taking your kids to dancing or swimming or whatever it is. And I think it is a juggling act. And I think people don't understand that. You think, oh, yeah, you get to go away and do all that. We do. But there's also the side of being away. And I don't want to paint a negative aspect because it's not. It's absolutely great to do all this stuff. I've been to great countries and, it really is fun, but I think people misunderstand it. A lot of people get into F1. I see it a lot where people working for teams thinking, oh, yeah, great. I love it. Absolutely love it. And travel. And then about 3 years later, they've jacked it in because it was all too much for them. So you do have to sort of have that balance, sticking power. Anyone wants to get in it, they can just reach out to me and I'll give them some tips if they've got anything. I've got 2 or 3 people already. Tomorrow I'm working, and they've asked me to have a look through some articles which they've put together. So I'm always happy to do that. I'm going to have a little look at that and give them some feedback. I'm doing a lecture or talk to some students later in the week down at Chichester University. So that's going to be cool. Yeah, always open to help. I think the biggest thing is perseverance. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and just get out there and start asking the questions, because no matter how silly you may think it is, it's still your question that you want answering, and it may give you the best answers, and everyone uses the quotes to your question. Just don't be afraid, go and do it.
Absolutely. Well,
That's
wise
it.
words there, Ben. And I agree, perseverance is so key as well. Like you mentioned too, even just in kind of your earlier days, people make mistakes and, you
Yeah.
might get bollocking for it or kicking for it.
Well, you
But
said that. I didn't say that. I was worried about saying that word.
don't worry, we're okay. We're
Yeah,
okay.
I really struggled not to say that word, and I was like, "Can I say that?" And I'm thinking in my head,
It's
say
the
that.
first thing that came, your facial
I know it
expressions
is. Yeah, I
gave
know. I
away.
was like contorted. I was like, "Come on, don't say that. What's another word for it?" Yeah.
But yeah, just there's so much to learn, and like you mentioned as well, like when you get everything right all the time and everything goes your way, I think it doesn't give, especially young people, any kind of depth of understanding of, like, coming over adversities, coming over trials and tribulations, finding the balance to
Yeah.
answers in life as well, in terms of their family life, in terms of work life, in terms of putting yourself out there, in terms of coming back from rejection. And also, Ben, just a big shout out to you as well, man, because you do a lot for the scene, you do a lot for the community. Like,
That's
I'm
very
sure
kind of
that
you.
nah, it's the truth, and what I would say as well, Ben, is that if there was like a younger Ben, and then younger Ben could meet older Ben,
Wow.
he'd be really happy, that there's someone out there like you that's an exemplary example, and actually someone that makes the time. Because I feel a lot of people, when they're on their journey, like you mentioned, they say, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's great, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that, and they forget almost like the humble beginnings of it and how tricky it can be to
You know
start.
what? You're very right, and I think we're all guilty when we go away. We sometimes forget just how fortunate we are to go to races. I keep thinking Saudi because I wasn't in Saudi. It's probably not a good example, but Miami in a couple of weeks. When you're there, there's often a moment where you stop and you think, "Oh my god, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is absolutely awesome." It might be, I don't know, go karting with Lewis. I've done that before, and they're real moments where you have to sort of stop and think, actually, that's really quite cool. Or being in a car with him, or whatever. And you're fortunate, but because it becomes almost a regular occurrence, you become complacent. So you do need to sometimes bring yourself back down and think, actually, this is the reason why I did it. So, I mean, for instance, in my early career, I remember, we're going to go back to football again because I used to do football, and I remember Chelsea played Barcelona in the Champions League. It was when Ronaldinho was playing for Chelsea. Sorry, for Barcelona.
Also, I
And
wish we had a Chelsea.
every single person I know on the planet was watching this football match, and I was doing some work for the non-league newspaper, and I was at a game, Canvey Island. I don't even know they were playing, and I got to the Canvey Island, and they didn't have a press pass for me, so I ended up buying a ticket, and I had to write about 300 words or something and file that, and all I kept thinking about was, oh my god, this is just ridiculous. This is miles. I was living in South London at the time. It's miles away from home. Everyone else is watching Chelsea, and I guess the thing is, I just didn't realise just, at that time, but that's what it's all about, covering the non-league, working your way up, and then, 10 years later, you're doing that Champions League game, maybe 15 years or whatever it was, but you're at the Champions League and you're doing that game. And then I was doing golf tournaments, meeting Tiger Woods. Then I'm doing, F1, meeting Lewis, and, there's some great people I've met throughout the year, Pele, for instance, meeting people like that. And like I say, I'm talking to you now, but I've got memories and, almost complacent because you become on to the next thing, on to the next thing. It's only when you stop, someone asks you and you think, oh yeah, I've done that. That's actually pretty cool. So what I'm saying is you've got to serve your apprenticeship, do it. Everyone else looks like they've made it. Your mates may be earning more money doing something at the time, whether they've left school and they're doing an apprenticeship, electrician or whatever, you may start at the bottom, but soon enough, if you work hard enough, you'll get to the top, to where you want to be, and you'll be doing life experiences. And I think that's where I'm at. I'm really enjoying going to see the world, get to meet some good people, and of course, I'm at the top of the paper in terms of their coverage and stuff. So it's good all round. All round,
Absolutely,
but you have to work hard.
for sure. And I think, perfectly put across as well, Ben, in terms of, like, there are no kind of easy days, or, it doesn't just come like that. You have to be willing to put the work in, you have to be willing to make the sacrifices. And
Yeah,
you know
people aren't going to give you a paddock pass. I think that's what people just assume, that you just get a paddock pass, but you have to work to get one.
mhm, absolutely. Well, I mean, on that bombshell, Ben, it's been an amazing one to have you in, and just to have the insight, just to chat Formula One as well, sports, to get the banter inside there as well. It's always lovely. So I can't wait to have you back later on, whenever
Cool.
that may be, because we're
Yeah.
always happy to have you here on Stripping the Dipping as well. And yeah, just is there anything that you're going to be getting up to for the next couple of days or weeks before we go to Australia?
Yeah, I'm going to do a MotoGP preview tomorrow.
Ooh.
Thursday, I'm doing a talk at Chichester University. Friday, I've got to write some F1 copy for the weekend. So yeah, fairly busy next couple of days.
It's exciting. And again, just Ben, let them know as well, where can they find you, in terms of Twitter, in terms of socials as well.
Yep. I'm on at Ben J Hunt at Twitter. I think it's something similar for Instagram. You'll find it through for the Twitter. And my podcast is Inside the Piranha Club, which I've recorded just before coming on to speak to you, and that will be going live tomorrow, I would imagine. So
Ooh.
be sure to check that out as well.
We'll definitely have to tune in, Ben, and that's a great plug as well. I love the name as well.
Am I allowed to do that? I should have
Yeah,
asked you
of
first.
course. No, Ben, of course. Like, we couldn't have you on without, we love that. We do want people to go and check it out as well. And
Yeah.
the value that you add to our podcast as well, Ben, is like, it's unquantifiable. So we're
Cool.
just super thankful
Nice.
to have you. And yeah, guys that have tuned in as well, I know lots of people watch back as well after with their commitment. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. It's been great to catch up and speak to Ben as well.
Nice.
Honorable shout out as well to Abby, of course, the F1 Blag, who co-contributed some of the comments as well. 60 plays as well. Thank you. RVD with his Ronaldinho comments there as well. Ronaldinho was a baller. Absolute baller. And the boss lady Georgina as well for making this possible. Because even for me, I just consider myself a normal guy from North London, and to be able to speak, to somebody like Ben, that has the insight and has the inside scoop on so many things which sometimes you go thinking about, it's amazing. So, a huge shout out to Georgina, the boss lady, for that as well. And yeah, from us here at Stripping the Dipping, thank you so much as always for tuning in. Thank you as always, guys. And yeah, we'll be back soon with another episode with another few guests in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned. And yeah, from ourselves and Ben, any final words, Ben?
Nice. No, nothing else to add. Hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, excellent.
Thanks for having me on. And obviously, if anyone does want to reach out for some tips, please do so.
100%. Well, Ben, we thank you immensely for your time today, and we're looking forward to getting you back on in subsequent episodes, hopefully later on in the year. But yeah, we wish you all the best as well. Stay safe.
Cool.
We continue to just say as well, continue doing the amazing job you do, because you really are the bridging foundation between the sports and the fans, so we really do appreciate the hard work. And yeah, all the best as well. Absolutely. Well, guys, it's been your boy AMG Dens, aka Modern Day Morgan Freeman. And yeah, until next time, we'll catch you guys soon. It's been us, and we're out. Peace.